my thought is, rather than going through sort of trying to litigate the merits of the case at an evidentiary hearing, maybe the better practice would be just flat out ask the man, when did you feel as though you first had an adverse interest to the water district?
Okay, that's a good question. Mr. Lonetti, when did you first think that your interests were adverse to the water districts?
Well, probably when I got accused of bribery.
Okay, so that would have been when you read the article where you wrote wrong?
If that was the first article, yes. That's when I first heard about it.
Okay, so that would have been May of 2011.
Yes, it was.
So you retained the law firm of Gordon Silver to assist you in connection with what we've been discussing, potential liability to possibly criminal liability, possible civil liability from the water district. It was then that you hired Gordon Silver, correct?
I did.
And so you hired primarily Dominic Gentile, correct?
Yes.
Specifically because you feared liability from the criminal charges and liability from civil liability from the water district, right?
Objection to the form of the question. Same pejorative.
Hired him first.
Objection to the form of the question. I didn't say that for your benefit, Judge.
Let me just ask this. I think I'll just like to take a point of order. Mr. Lonetti, when did you hire Gordon Silver to represent you in either concerns about the civil case or the criminal investigation?
When I was brought into the criminal case.
Did you know about when that was? Or can you give me representation as to when you were hired?
Sure.
I mean, you just established that.
Yes, Your Honor. June 1st of 2011 was his meeting with Mr. Gentile regarding the firm representing.
Okay, you think that's a fair statement of it? June 1st or so of 2011 is when you hired Gordon Silver?
Yes.
Okay, good.
And you hired them because you feared liability in the criminal investigation potentially as well as civil
Well, I
liability?
mean, we know why he hired him. I mean, we know that already. It's been established.
Okay.
Okay?
I just want to make sure the record's clear that it was for both criminal and civil. That's
Right, he's already said that.
okay. You also knew at that time that George Benish had been the longtime legal counsel for the Virgin Valley Water District, correct?
Yes.
And it was basically common knowledge throughout the valley that George Benish was general counsel for the water district, correct?
Yes.
And you knew that back in 2005 and 2008, right?
Yes.
You also knew when you retained Gordon Silver that George Benish was no longer representing the water district.
Well, yes.
And George Benish was brought in because he had knowledge of water rights in the Virgin Valley. The reason that George Benish was striking. You mentioned that you retained Gordon Silver. At some point, you also retained George Benish, correct?
Yes.
And part of the reason for that retention of George Benish was because he had knowledge of the Virgin Valley, correct?
No, that's not the first time I hired George Benish. I hired George Benish. The first time was on his billing was November the 2nd, 2009.
Okay. My question, Mr. Lonetti, is when you first hired George Benish, wasn't it in connection with this lease issue we were just talking about where the water district was demanding payment from you? Isn't that when you first hired him, at least as it relates to the issues involved in this case?
Well, yes, but like I said, the first time I hired him was in 2009.
Okay. All right. And then when you contacted him about issues related to this case, it was because the water district was demanding payment from you, correct?
Objection to the form of the question assumes that the lease is related to this litigation.
I had...
Hold on. You have a response to that?
Well, he already testified that it was permit 54383, which is the same water involved in the 2008 transaction, then leased back, that he continued to use, and then the water district demanded that he pay the water district for, so I think it's clearly been established that it's the same water.
Somebody's
Your
guessing.
Honor, whether it's it is water deriving from the same source is really irrelevant to this litigation. They haven't raised a claim in this civil litigation that Mr. Lonetti owes them any money with respect to the lease. In May of 2011, they said, listen, lease the water or don't use it. Mr. Lonetti paid it. There's no aspect of that in this litigation whatsoever. So it may be the same water, but it's not related to this litigation, and that's where I have the problem.
All right. I'm going to sustain the objection really for a whole different reason. I mean, I have all that testimony from Mr. Benish. I have Mr. Benish's billings to Mr. Lonetti. And I think it's well explained, the timeline and the reasons for the involvement of Mr. Benish with Mr. Lonetti. So
Okay.
it's really duplicative, is what
Okay.
I'd say. So
All right, I'll move on to
Yeah.
a different topic.